Hi, my name's Connor, and I'm one half of Hidden Rabbits. Normally, I've got my lovely girlfriend, Lindsey, sitting across from me, and we're usually talking about historical facts and shooting a podcast together. But she's actually out of town in Vermont, of all places, on a writer's residency, which is really cool, but makes it hard to shoot a podcast. So I'm kind of taking over for the next couple of weeks and shooting content like this. It's going to be a little shorter, and really it's supposed to be me trying to keep Lindsey up to date with some historical facts every week. And hopefully you learned something too. So Lindsey, if you're watching this, you are watching this, I know you are. I wanted to do an episode about Vermont and kind of the history of Vermont because it's got some crazy stuff. I took a lot of notes. Hold on. I took a lot of notes. So I want to read you some things about Vermont. In case you didn't know, Vermont is known as the Green Mountain State. Population of 648,000 people, which is a lot less people than I thought. People there are called Vermonters. It actually puts it at 49th in terms of ranking in the United States for population, which you would think that list would end at 50 because we only have 50 states, but that list actually goes up to like 56 or 57 because of places like Guam and Puerto Rico, and Washington, D.C. is also its own thing. In case you're wondering, we live in California, and their population is 39,430,000. It's probably why we feel so crowded all the time. So hopefully you're enjoying all that new space with all the less people. State things. The official amphibian of Vermont, which apparently states have amphibians, is the northern leopard frog. Likewise, the reptile of Vermont, which I didn't know states had reptiles, is the painted turtle. The official mammal of Vermont is the Morgan horse, which is one of the earliest breeds that was actually from the U.S., mostly used for coaches, harness racing, cavalry in the Civil War, etc. The official beverage of Vermont is milk, which neither you or I can drink. And the official food of Vermont is apple pie, which I love. And there's apparently a law on the books. I don't know if it's a law, but apple pie must be served in Vermont with either milk, ice cream, or cheddar cheese, which sounds disgusting and should not be a thing. But it is. Let's get into some of the history of Vermont, I guess, is the next thing we should do. The big thing that people wanted this area for was the gigantic freshwater lake known as Lake Champlain, which is named after Samuel de Champlain, who was a French kind of geographer, traveler, explorer type, who originally discovered it. And like all big discoveries in the United States historically, nobody actually discovered it because there were people living there, as you can guess. In this area, it's going to be the Iroquois native tribes and the Algonquin native tribes. So the French were fighting these Native American tribes for a very long time. And that's kind of why nobody ever settled in Vermont permanently. There's a series of bases. And again, they just wanted to protect the fresh water. So the French would do their thing for a couple of years. And then in 1763, Great Britain would eventually get it in a treaty that they signed with France. So now it's under the possession of Great Britain, and it's kind of claimed by both New Hampshire and New York at the same time, which were both provinces under Great Britain. Vermont wasn't anything official yet. It was just kind of a tract of land, but New Hampshire and New York both said, that's mine. And like all governances in this time, they started selling off tracts of land in the area. But because they couldn't come to an agreement on who owned what, they started selling off tracts of the same land to different people, which caused a lot of problems. By selling land like they did, eventually multiple settlers would try to settle on the same piece of property, which led to a lot of disputes, as you can imagine. All these mad people started sending letters. Eventually, King George III said that this area was officially under the control of New York, which you'd think would end it, but it actually made people more upset because there are people from New Hampshire who had also settled in the area. What are they supposed to do, right? All of these disagreements eventually led to one angry farmer named Ethan Allen to start his own kind of private militia called the Green Mountain Boys. The Green Mountain Boys would go on to attack settlers from New York and land speculators trying to buy up tracts of land in the Vermont area. They were guerrilla fighters. They would hide in the woods and attack people. It was really interesting, kind of, the kind of power to the people type thing. The Green Mountain Boys would also eventually go on to actually join America in the Revolutionary War to fight against Britain. Okay, moving on to page 2 of my notes. In 1777, this area declared independence. They weren't officially a part of the colonies, so they had to kind of declare their own independence outside of the United States. And they called themselves New Connecticut, not Vermont. And they passed their own constitution, which was actually the first North American constitution to ban adult slavery. Now, you'll notice that I said adult slavery, not all slavery. And that's because they specified that slaves would be freed at the age of 21 for men or 18 for women. So they still allowed slaves, but not as adults. I don't know why it took us so long to figure that part out. They eventually changed their name to Vermont, and they governed themselves for about 14 years, which was made tricky because of New York, who kept claiming that Vermont technically belonged to them. It was their land. So Vermont paid them some money, and then eventually they were let into the United States as the 14th state of the Union, which, if my counting is correct, that makes them the first state outside of the original 13 colonies to become a state, which is kind of cool. In my research on Vermont, I read a comment on Reddit that said, if the United States was the entire world, then Vermont would be kind of like Iceland. Everybody there is really nice, but keeps to themselves. Beyond this brief and colorful history, which I have outlined, they're also the state where Ben & Jerry's was founded. They've outlawed billboards, and it's the home state of Bernie Sanders. That's just a quick look into everything that I now know about Vermont and that I wanted to share with you. So Lindsey, I hope your writer's residency is going well. I hope these facts about Vermont bring you some comfort while you're away from home. And I can't wait until you're back and we can actually start making podcasts about history again. But in the meantime, I hope this amount of history suffices, and I'll see you next week.